The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Wildwood's pristine grounds as 12-year-old Zara Williams stepped off the bus, her small frame dwarfed by the towering pines that surrounded the exclusive summer camp. Her dark eyes took in the sprawling facilities, the Olympic-sized pool, the perfectly manicured sports fields, the rustic yet expensive-looking cabins that housed the children of tech moguls, politicians, and old money families. She clutched her worn duffel bag tighter, the military-issued fabric a stark contrast to the designer luggage being unloaded around her. "Welcome to Camp Wildwood," announced Mrs. Harrison, the camp director, her smile as polished as her pearls. "We're so excited to have you all here for what promises to be an unforgettable summer experience." Zara had earned her spot through a scholarship program her school counselor had recommended. Her father, Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, had been deployed overseas for the past 6 months, and her mother thought the camp would be good for her, a chance to make friends, try new activities, and maybe forget for a while that Dad wasn't coming home for another 4 months. As the campers were divided into groups, Zara found herself assigned to Cabin 7 with 5 other girls. The moment she walked through the door, she felt the weight of their stares. Madison Pierce, a blonde girl with designer hiking boots and a perfectly straightened ponytail, looked her up and down with undisguised disdain. "Great," Madison whispered to her friend Chelsea, loud enough for Zara to hear. "They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel this year." Zara pretended not to hear, focusing instead on claiming the bottom bunk in the corner, the one nobody else wanted. She began unpacking her few belongings: 3 changes of clothes, a photo of her and her father in his dress uniform, and a small leather journal her dad had given her before his deployment. "Is that your dad?" asked a girl named Emma, pointing to the photo. Her voice carried genuine curiosity, not malice. "Yeah," Zara replied softly. "He's deployed right now." Madison scoffed. "Let me guess. He's in the military because he couldn't get a real job." The words hit Zara like a slap. Her father had 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star, had saved countless lives, had dedicated his life to serving his country. But she simply turned away, her mother's words echoing in her mind. "Choose your battles, baby girl. Not every fight is worth fighting." That first evening at dinner, the social hierarchy became crystal clear. Madison and her crew, Chelsea, Brittany, and 2 boys named Connor and Blake, sat at the center table, holding court like royalty. Their parents were senators, CEOs, and philanthropists. They spoke casually about their families' ski houses in Aspen and beach homes in the Hamptons. Zara sat with Emma and 2 other scholarship kids, Marcus and Sophia, at a table near the back. She noticed how the camp counselors, all college-aged kids from similar privileged backgrounds, gravitated toward Madison's table, laughing a little too hard at their jokes and turning a blind eye to their casual cruelty. "Don't let them get to you," Emma said, following Zara's gaze. "Madison's been queen bee here for 3 summers running. Her dad practically owns half the camp's board." "I'm not worried about her," Zara replied, though her jaw was tight. In truth, she was worried. Not about Madison herself, but about the long summer ahead and how she was going to survive it without her father's steady presence and wisdom. The next morning brought the first official humiliation. During the morning swim session, Zara had just finished her laps when she realized her towel was missing. She looked around frantically, water dripping from her hair, when she heard laughter from the pool deck. Madison was holding the towel high above her head, waving it like a flag. "Looking for this, scholarship girl?" she called out, her voice carrying across the water. "Give it back," Zara said, trying to keep her voice steady as she climbed out of the pool. Every eye in the area was on her, and she felt exposed in more ways than one. "Say please," Madison demanded, her friends giggling behind her. "Please," Zara said through gritted teeth. Madison dropped the towel in a puddle of pool water. "Oops," she said with mock innocence. "Looks like you'll have to air dry." The counselor, Jake, barely looked up from his phone. "Come on, girls, let's keep it friendly." That afternoon, during arts and crafts, Zara returned to find her leather journal, the one her father had given her, soaked in what smelled like orange juice. Pages of her private thoughts, her letters to her dad, her drawings and poems, were ruined. She looked around the cabin, but Madison and her friends were nowhere to be seen. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Emma found Zara behind the cabin 20 minutes later, carefully trying to separate the wet pages. "I'm so sorry," Emma said. I saw Madison with a juice box earlier, but I didn't think. It's fine, Zara said, though her voice cracked slightly. It's just a book. But it wasn't just a book. It was her connection to her father, her safe space to express the fears and loneliness she couldn't voice aloud. The violation felt deeper than anything Madison had done so far. That evening, as the campers gathered around the fire for s'mores and ghost stories, Madison raised her hand when the counselor asked for volunteers to share scary stories. I have one, she said, her eyes glinting in the firelight. It's about a girl who comes to camp pretending to be something she's not. She acts tough, but really she's just scared and alone because her daddy abandoned her. The implication was clear, and Zara felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger. Her father hadn't abandoned her. He was serving his country, risking his life for people like Madison, who would never appreciate the sacrifice. That's not scary, called out Connor. That's just sad. The group erupted in laughter, and Zara stood up abruptly, mumbling something about needing the bathroom. She walked quickly into the darkness, her vision blurred with tears she refused to shed in front of them. She found herself at the camp's small chapel, a rustic building that served all faiths. Inside, she pulled out her phone and tried to call her father, but the call went straight to voicemail. The time difference, combined with his mission schedule, made communication nearly impossible. Instead, she sat in the quiet darkness and remembered the self-defense lessons her father had taught her in their garage back home. Your size isn't your weakness, Zara, he had said, showing her how to use an opponent's momentum against them. Your mind is your greatest weapon. Stay calm, stay focused, and remember, you're stronger than you think. The lessons had been fun then, just daddy-daughter time. She never imagined she'd need them. The next few days brought a systematic campaign of harassment. Zara's clothes disappeared from the laundry line, found later stuffed in a trash can. Her bed was short-sheeted. Salt was put in her orange juice. Each incident was small enough to be dismissed as a prank, but collectively they created an atmosphere of constant humiliation. The counselors, when they bothered to intervene at all, treated it as typical camp hijinks. Girls will be girls, Jake said when Emma reported the clothes incident. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. But Zara knew better. This was warfare, and she was fighting it alone. The breaking point came during the camp's talent show preparation. Zara had signed up to perform a spoken word piece she'd written about her father's service, something meaningful that might help the other campers understand that military families weren't less than anyone else. She spent hours practicing in private, perfecting every word, every gesture. This was her chance to show them who she really was, to honor her father's sacrifice, to maybe even earn some respect. The night before the performance, she went to bed early, her journal pages spread out on her nightstand, the ones she'd managed to salvage and rewrite. She woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of suppressed laughter. Madison and Chelsea were standing over her bed, Madison holding a pair of scissors. The girls had cut up her journal pages into confetti, and they were sprinkling the pieces over her while she slept. Sweet dreams, scholarship girl, Madison whispered. Zara sat up, her heart hammering. What did you do? Nothing permanent, Madison said innocently. Just a little arts and crafts project. You can tape it back together if you want. The cruelty was breathtaking. These weren't just words on a page. They were her connection to her father, her private thoughts about missing him, her fears about fitting in, her hopes for the future. And now they were scattered like trash across her bed. You're sick, Zara said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Madison replied, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. I'm rich, and you're nothing. Don't forget it. The next morning, Zara marched to the camp director's office. Mrs. Harrison listened with half an ear as Zara explained what had happened, occasionally nodding and making sympathetic noises. I understand you're having some adjustment issues, Mrs. Harrison said finally. Change can be difficult, especially when you're from a different background. But I'm sure if you just try to fit in better, the other girls will warm up to you. They destroyed my personal belongings, Zara said, her voice rising. They've been harassing me for weeks. Now, Mrs. Harrison said, her tone becoming firmer. Let's not use such dramatic language. Madison is from a wonderful family. Her father is on our board of directors. I'm sure whatever happened was just a misunderstanding. If you're enjoying this story of courage and standing up to bullies, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. Zara left the office feeling more alone than ever. The system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as designed. Madison's family money bought her immunity, while Zara's scholarship status made her expendable. That afternoon, during free time, Zara sat by the lake, trying to piece together what remained of her journal. Most of it was beyond saving, but she managed to find a few intact pages, including one with a quote her father had written. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting in spite of it." She was so focused on the pages that she didn't notice the group approaching until it was too late. Madison, Chelsea, Connor, and Blake surrounded her, their shadows blocking out the sun. "Still playing with your trash?" Madison asked, kicking at the journal pieces. "Leave me alone," Zara said, standing up. She was smaller than all of them, but her father's training had taught her that confidence was half the battle. "Or what?" Connor laughed. "You'll call your daddy?" "Oh wait, he's too busy playing soldier to care about you." The insult to her father, who was risking his life for people like Connor, snapped something inside Zara. She stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "Don't talk about my father," she said, her voice deadly quiet. Madison smiled, sensing she'd found the perfect button to push. "What's he doing over there anyway?" "Probably hiding in some bunker while real soldiers do the fighting." "He's a Marine sniper," Zara said, her voice growing stronger. "He saved more lives than you could count." "Sure he has," Blake said. "I bet he's just a cook or something. They probably just told you he was important to make you feel better." The laughter that followed was the last straw. Zara had endured weeks of harassment, had watched the adults who were supposed to protect her turn a blind eye, had seen her most precious possessions destroyed, but she would not stand there and listen to them mock her father's service. "My father," she said, her voice carrying across the water, "is one of the most decorated snipers in the Marine Corps. He's on his 3rd deployment, and he's over there fighting for freedom, including the freedom of spoiled brats like you to sit here and act like you're better than everyone else." The group fell silent, surprised by the steel in her voice. Madison recovered first, her face twisting with rage. "You think you're so special," she hissed, "but you're just trash. Your whole family is trash, and no matter how tough you act, you'll never be anything more than a charity case." With that, she shoved Zara hard in the chest. Zara stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the wet rocks at the lake's edge. She fell hard, her back hitting the stone, pain shooting through her ribs. The group walked away, laughing, leaving Zara alone by the water. She sat there for a long time, her father's journal pieces scattered around her, feeling more isolated than ever. But something had changed in that moment. Madison had made a crucial mistake. She'd escalated from psychological warfare to physical violence. And Zara's father had taught her that once someone puts their hands on you, the rules change completely. As she picked up the soggy remains of her journal, Zara made a decision. She was done being a victim. She was done hoping the adults would help her. She was done trying to fit in with people who saw her as less than human. It was time to remind Madison and her friends that they weren't the only ones with fight in them. The next morning brought news that would change everything. During the camp's morning announcements, Mrs. Harrison mentioned that they had a special guest visiting later that week, a motivational speaker who would be talking about overcoming adversity and finding inner strength. Zara barely paid attention, focused instead on the plan forming in her mind. She'd spent the night remembering every lesson her father had taught her, every principle he'd instilled in her about standing up to bullies and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. But she also remembered his most important lesson. Never start a fight, Zara. But if someone else starts one, you finish it. The harassment continued, but now Zara endured it with a different kind of patience. She was no longer the scared little girl who had arrived at camp 2 weeks ago. She was a Marine's daughter, and she was planning her counterattack. The opportunity came sooner than expected. During that afternoon's obstacle course activity, Madison orchestrated her most public humiliation yet. As Zara was climbing the rope wall, Madison loosened one of the safety ropes below, causing Zara to fall hard onto the mat below. "Oops," Madison said as Zara groaned in pain. "Guess you're not as tough as you thought." The counselor, as usual, treated it as an accident. But Zara saw the smirk on Madison's face, the high five she shared with Chelsea when she thought no one was looking. That evening, as the campers gathered for dinner, Zara noticed something different. Emma was sitting alone, her face red and puffy, as if she'd been crying. When Zara approached, Emma looked up with frightened eyes. "They said if I keep hanging around you, they'll make sure I don't get invited back next year," Emma whispered. My mom worked so hard to get me this scholarship. I can't lose it. And there it was, the full extent of Madison's power. It wasn't enough to torment Zara. She had to isolate her completely, turn even her few allies against her. Zara squeezed Emma's shoulder. "It's okay," she said. "I understand." But inside she was burning. Madison had just made her biggest mistake yet. She'd shown Zara that her cruelty extended beyond personal vendetta. She was willing to hurt innocent people to maintain her power. That night, as her cabin mates slept, Zara slipped out into the darkness. She needed to clear her head, to think, to plan. She found herself at the camp's small training area, where various self-defense and martial arts equipment was stored. In the moonlight, she began to practice the forms her father had taught her. The movements came back naturally, the breathing exercises, the balance drills, the techniques for using an opponent's size against them. For the first time in weeks, she felt centered, focused. She was so absorbed in her practice that she almost missed the figure watching from the shadows. When she finally noticed the silhouette, her heart hammered in her chest. "Don't stop," said a voice from the darkness. "Those are excellent techniques." A man stepped into the moonlight, tall, lean, with the bearing of someone who had seen combat. He was maybe 40, with graying hair and kind eyes that seemed to see everything. "I'm sorry," Zara said, immediately stopping her practice. "I didn't know anyone was here. I'll go back to my cabin." "Please don't," the man said, raising a gentle hand. "I'm David Chen. I'm the guest speaker your camp director mentioned. I arrived early and couldn't sleep, so I thought I'd take a walk. I couldn't help but notice your form. Someone taught you well." "My father," Zara said simply. "Military? Marine sniper. He's deployed." David nodded with understanding. "I was Army myself. Special Forces. I recognize the training style. Your father taught you well. But I also recognize something else." "What?" "The anger, the isolation, the feeling that you're fighting a war nobody else can see." Zara stared at him, surprised by how accurately he'd read her situation. "How did you know?" "Because I've been there. Different circumstances, same feeling. Want to tell me about it?" And to her surprise, Zara found herself opening up to this stranger. She told him about Madison and her crew, about the systematic harassment, about the adults who refused to help, about feeling trapped and alone. David listened without judgment, occasionally asking gentle questions. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Your father taught you physical techniques," he said finally. "But did he teach you about strategy? About choosing your battles? About the difference between fighting and winning?" "He always said to choose my battles wisely." "Smart man. So tell me, what battle are you choosing here?" Zara thought about it. "I want them to stop. I want them to leave me alone." "That's a goal, not a battle. The battle is about something deeper. It's about power, respect, and the systems that allow bullies to flourish. If you just want them to leave you alone, you're thinking too small." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Madison and her friends aren't the real problem. They're symptoms. The real problem is a system that protects bullies as long as they have money and connections. If you want to create real change, you need to expose that system." As David spoke, Zara felt something shift inside her. He was right. She'd been thinking like a victim, focused on survival. But she was a Marine's daughter, and Marines didn't just survive. They accomplished their mission. "What would you do?" she asked. "I'd give them exactly what they want," David said with a slight smile. "I'd let them think they'd won, right up until the moment they realized they'd lost everything." The conversation with David Chen had planted a seed that grew throughout the following day. Zara found herself looking at her situation differently, not as a victim trapped by circumstances, but as a strategist planning a campaign. Her father had always told her that the best warriors weren't the strongest or the fastest, but the smartest. Madison, sensing what she thought was Zara's growing defeat, decided to escalate her campaign. During the morning's hiking activity, she orchestrated an accident that left Zara's backpack, containing her water bottle, snacks, and emergency whistle, at the bottom of a ravine. "Clumsy me," Madison said with fake sympathy as Zara stared down at her scattered belongings. "I hope you're not too thirsty." The counselor, Jason, barely looked up from his trail map. "There's a water fountain back at base camp," he said dismissively. "We'll be back in 2 hours." But Zara didn't complain. Instead, she accepted a water bottle from Marcus, one of the other scholarship kids, and continued the hike. She was learning to see Madison's cruelty as information, data about her enemy's methods, weaknesses, and the extent of her institutional protection. That afternoon, during the camp's weekly family call time, Zara finally managed to connect with her father. The video connection was poor, pixelated and delayed, but seeing his face, even on a small screen, gave her strength she hadn't felt in weeks. "You look tired, baby girl," Staff Sergeant Williams said, his voice distorted by distance and military encryption. "Camp keeping you busy?" "Something like that," Zara replied, not wanting to burden him with her problems while he was dealing with life-or-death situations overseas. "I can see it in your eyes," he said gently. "You're fighting something. Want to tell your old man about it?" So she did. In careful coded language, aware that their calls might be monitored, she told him about the training exercises at camp, about the opposing force that seemed to have superior resources and institutional support. Her father listened carefully, his expression growing more serious. "Sounds like you're dealing with an asymmetric warfare situation," he said finally. "What does that tell you about strategy?" "That I can't fight them using their methods," Zara replied. "I need to find a different approach." "Exactly. And what's the most important thing in asymmetric warfare?" "Intelligence. Know your enemy better than they know themselves." "That's my girl. And remember, sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to let them defeat themselves." Before the call ended, her father said something that would stick with her for days. "Zara, I want you to remember something. You're not just representing yourself out there. You're representing our family, our values, and everyone who looks like us who might come after you. How you handle this situation will matter long after camp is over." The weight of his words settled on her shoulders like a mantle. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something bigger. That evening, David Chen gave his scheduled presentation to the entire camp. His talk was about overcoming adversity, but Zara heard a different message in his words. He spoke about the importance of documentation, of building alliances, of understanding that real change often required exposing uncomfortable truths. "The most powerful weapon against injustice," he said, his eyes briefly meeting Zara's, "is truth, but truth without evidence is just opinion. An opinion without strategy is just noise." After the presentation, David approached Zara during the social hour. "Walk with me," he said quietly. They strolled to the edge of the camp property, where the forest began and the sounds of the other campers faded to background noise. "I've been observing," David said without preamble. "You're right about the systematic nature of what you're facing. Madison Pierce, her father is James Pierce, CEO of Pierce Industries. He's donated over $2 million to this camp over the past 5 years. Chelsea Morrison's mother is a federal judge. Connor Blake's family owns half the real estate in this county. How do you know all this?" "Because I make it my business to know. I work with kids who face these kinds of situations all the time. The wealthy elite often raise children who believe they're untouchable, and unfortunately, they usually are. So there's no way to fight back." "I didn't say that. But if you're going to fight, you need to fight smart. You need evidence, witnesses, and a strategy that exposes the system's failures so completely that they can't ignore it." David pulled out a small device, a nearly invisible recording device disguised as a button. "Audio and video," he said. "Military grade. Your father would approve." Zara stared at the device. "You want me to record them? I want you to give them enough rope to hang themselves. But only if you're prepared for what comes next. Once you start down this path, there's no going back. They'll escalate, and you'll need to be ready." "What kind of ready?" "The kind your father trained you for. The kind that requires courage, discipline, and the willingness to stand up when everyone else is sitting down." Zara took the device, feeling its weight in her palm. "What's the plan?" "First, we document everything. Every incident, every failure by the staff to intervene, every example of the institutional bias that protects them. Then we wait for them to make their biggest mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "The kind that bullies always make when they think they're untouchable. They'll go too far, probably in front of witnesses, and that's when we'll have them." Over the next few days, Zara became a different kind of camper. She still endured the harassment, but now she was gathering intelligence. The recording device captured Madison's cruel comments, the staff's dismissive responses, and the systematic nature of the campaign against her. She also began to notice things she'd missed before. Emma wasn't the only scholarship kid being pressured to avoid her. Marcus had been assigned to different activities, effectively separating him from Zara. Sophia had been moved to a different cabin after complaining about the harassment. It was a coordinated effort to isolate her completely, and it had Mrs. Harrison's fingerprints all over it. The breakthrough came during the camp's weekly community service day. The campers were taken to a local food bank to help sort donations, and Zara found herself working alongside a volunteer named Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind woman in her 50s who immediately took a liking to her. "You're very mature for your age," Mrs. Rodriguez said as they organized canned goods. "Your parents must be proud." "My dad's deployed," Zara said. "He's a Marine sniper. My son was in the Marines," Mrs. Rodriguez replied warmly. "Served 3 tours in Afghanistan. I know how hard it is on the families." As they worked, Zara found herself opening up to Mrs. Rodriguez about her camp experience. The older woman listened with growing concern. "That's terrible," she said finally. "Have you told your parents? I don't want to worry my dad while he's overseas. And my mom. She worked so hard to get me this scholarship. I don't want her to think it was a mistake." Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Mija, can I tell you something? I've been volunteering here for 15 years. I've seen kids from that camp come through many times. Most of them are spoiled and dismissive, but a few have been different. They've been kind, respectful, grateful, and without exception, those kids have been the scholarship recipients." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that camp doesn't deserve you. But more importantly, I'm saying that you deserve to be heard. And if the adults at that camp won't listen, maybe it's time to find adults who will." She pressed a business card into Zara's hand. "My daughter is a reporter for the local newspaper. She specializes in stories about inequality and injustice. If you ever want to tell your story, she'd listen." That evening, Zara called her mother for the first time since arriving at camp. She'd been putting it off, not wanting to admit that the camp experience wasn't what they'd hoped for. "Baby, you sound different," her mother said immediately. "Are you okay?" And finally, Zara told her everything. The harassment, the destroyed belongings, the staff's refusal to help, the systematic isolation. Her mother listened in growing horror. "We're getting you out of there," her mother said immediately. "I'll drive up tomorrow and—" "No, Mom," Zara interrupted. "I need to finish this." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if I leave now, nothing changes. Madison and her friends will keep doing this to other kids. The system will keep protecting bullies as long as they have money. Dad always taught me to complete the mission." "Zara, you're 12 years old. This isn't your mission." "Yes, it is. Dad said I'm representing our family, our values, and everyone who looks like us. If I run away now, I'm letting all of them down." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to trust me, and I need you to be ready to act when I give you the signal." "What kind of signal?" "The kind that means it's time to call that reporter Mrs. Rodriguez told me about." The next morning brought a new level of harassment. Madison had apparently decided that Zara's resilience was a challenge to be met with increased cruelty. During breakfast, she accidentally spilled orange juice on Zara's only clean camp shirt. During swimming, she convinced the lifeguard that Zara was a weak swimmer who needed constant supervision, forcing her to wear a life jacket like a much younger child. But the worst came during the afternoon's horseback riding activity. Madison had somehow arranged for Zara to be given Thunder, an older horse with a reputation for being difficult. As they rode along the trail, Madison maneuvered her horse close to Zara's and whispered something that made Thunder rear up, nearly throwing Zara from the saddle. "Careful," Madison said loudly for the benefit of the counselor. "Some people just aren't cut out for certain activities." But Zara had been riding since she was 8. Her father had taught her during their visits to her grandfather's ranch in Texas. She controlled Thunder expertly, settling him with the kind of calm confidence that comes from real skill. Madison's face twisted with rage at her failure to humiliate Zara. "You think you're so special," she hissed, quiet enough that only Zara could hear. "But you're nothing, and before this week is over, I'm going to prove it to everyone. This is about to get intense. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on because stories like this one show us what real strength looks like. What's your prediction for how this ends? Drop it in the comments below." That evening, David Chen found Zara practicing her forms again in the moonlight. "You're getting stronger," he observed, "physically and mentally." "I'm getting angry," Zara corrected. "Good. Anger can be a tool if you control it instead of letting it control you. Are you ready for the next phase?" "What's the next phase?" "The phase where we give Madison exactly what she wants. a public confrontation where she can demonstrate her power. But this time, we'll be ready for her. David outlined his plan. The camp's annual talent show was in 3 days, and Madison had been bragging about her performance, an elaborate dance routine that her parents had paid a professional choreographer to create. It would be her moment of triumph, her chance to remind everyone of her superiority. She'll be at her most confident, David explained. Her guard will be down, and she'll be surrounded by her parents and their friends. If she's going to make her biggest mistake, it'll be then. What kind of mistake? The kind that reveals who she really is, in front of people who matter. Your job is to be ready when she does. Over the next 2 days, Zara prepared. She practiced her self-defense techniques, reviewed everything she'd recorded, and mentally prepared for what she knew would be the most important confrontation of her young life. She also reached out to the other scholarship kids, Emma, Marcus, and Sophia, and to her surprise, found that they were ready to stand with her. Madison's campaign of intimidation had affected all of them, and they were tired of living in fear. "We should have said something sooner," Emma said during a secret meeting behind the arts and crafts cabin. "We were just scared." "We're all scared," Zara replied. "But being scared doesn't mean we have to be powerless." The night before the talent show, Zara had trouble sleeping. She kept thinking about her father's words about representation, about standing up for those who would come after her. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez's son, who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan. She thought about all the kids who would attend this camp in future years, and whether they would face the same systematic cruelty she had endured. Finally, she got up and went to the small chapel where she'd cried alone on her first night. This time, she didn't cry. Instead, she knelt in the darkness and made a promise, to herself, to her father, to everyone who looked like her, that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the truth would finally have its day. The morning of the talent show dawned clear and bright, with parents and family members arriving throughout the day. Zara watched from her cabin window as expensive cars pulled up, disgorging well-dressed adults who clearly belonged in this world of privilege and power. Madison was in her element, holding court with her parents and their friends, basking in the attention and adoration. She wore a designer outfit that probably cost more than Zara's family spent on clothes in a year, and her smile was radiant with confidence. But Zara wasn't intimidated anymore. She was focused, centered, ready. She touched the recording device David had given her, checked that her phone was charged and ready to live stream if necessary, and reviewed her mental checklist one final time. The talent show would begin at 7. By 9, everyone would know exactly who Madison Pierce really was. And the best part? Madison was going to expose herself. The talent show stage was set up in the camp's main pavilion, with rows of chairs arranged for the parents and family members who had come to watch their children perform. Zara sat in the back with the other scholarship kids, her heart hammering as she watched Madison hold court with her parents and their wealthy friends. James Pierce was everything Zara had imagined. Tall, commanding, with the kind of presence that came from a lifetime of having his orders followed without question. His wife, Catherine, was perfectly put together in a way that suggested hours of daily maintenance and unlimited resources. They sat in the front row like royalty, expecting their daughter to deliver a performance worthy of their investment. The first few acts were typical camp fare: a magic show by Connor that went moderately well, a singing performance by 2 younger campers that earned polite applause, and a comedy routine by Blake that relied heavily on crude humor that made some parents shift uncomfortably in their seats. Then it was Madison's turn. She took the stage in a shimmering costume that caught the pavilion lights perfectly, and launched into a dance routine that was undeniably impressive. Her parents had clearly spared no expense. The choreography was professional level, the music was perfectly edited, and Madison executed every move with the precision that came from months of expensive private instruction. The audience was captivated, and Madison fed off their attention like a flower turning toward the sun. This was her moment of absolute triumph, her chance to remind everyone present why she was the undisputed queen of Camp Wildwood. As the routine reached its climax, Madison's eyes found Zara in the back row. Even from the stage, Zara could see the smug satisfaction on her face, the look of someone who had won completely and wanted her defeated opponent to know it. But Zara didn't look defeated. She looked calm, focused, ready. Madison's routine ended to thunderous applause. and she took her bows with the radiant smile of someone who knew she had just delivered a flawless performance. As she walked off stage, her parents beamed with pride, and several other wealthy families offered congratulations. "That's going to be hard to follow," announced Mrs. Harrison, clearly caught up in the moment. "But let's continue with our next performer, Zara Williams, with a spoken word piece." The applause was noticeably more subdued as Zara walked to the stage. She could feel the weight of judgmental eyes, could sense the skepticism radiating from the wealthy parents who wondered what the scholarship girl could possibly offer after Madison's professional-level performance. Zara took the microphone and looked out at the audience. In the front row, Madison sat between her parents, her smile sharp with anticipated victory. Behind them, David Chen gave Zara an almost imperceptible nod. "My piece tonight is called Invisible Valor," Zara began, her voice steady and clear. "It's about the heroes we don't see, the sacrifices we don't acknowledge, and the courage it takes to stand up when everyone else is sitting down." She began to speak, her words painting a picture of her father's service, the nights he spent protecting people who would never know his name, the family dinners missed for the sake of national security, the quiet heroism of military families who sacrificed so others could sleep safely. The audience grew quiet, drawn in despite themselves. Even Madison's smile began to fade as Zara's words revealed depths of experience and maturity that none of them had expected from the small girl they'd dismissed. "But this piece isn't just about my father," Zara continued, her voice growing stronger. "It's about all the invisible heroes, the scholarship kids who work twice as hard for half the recognition, the cleaning staff who make our comfortable lives possible, the volunteers who serve others without expecting anything in return." She could see discomfort rippling through the wealthy parents, could sense that her words were hitting closer to home than they'd anticipated. But she wasn't done. "It's also about the invisible cruelty that happens when people think no one is watching," Zara said, her eyes finding Madison's. "The systematic harassment of those who are different, the institutional protection of bullies who have money and connections, the silence of adults who choose comfort over courage." Madison's face was no longer smiling. A flush of anger was creeping up her neck, and Zara could see her parents exchanging confused glances. But most of all, Zara concluded, it's about the moment when the invisible becomes visible, when truth cuts through privilege, and when courage finally finds its voice. The applause that followed was different from what Madison had received. Thoughtful, respectful, tinged with recognition that they had just witnessed something real and powerful. As Zara walked off stage, she saw Madison's face twisted with rage. The contrast between the two performances had been stark. Madison's polished but shallow routine versus Zara's raw, authentic truth, and everyone in the audience had felt it. But Zara knew the real confrontation was still coming. During the intermission, as parents mingled and congratulated their children, Madison cornered Zara behind the refreshment table. Her mask of perfection had slipped completely, revealing the ugly truth beneath. "You think you're so clever," Madison hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You think one little speech makes you special? You're still nothing, and everyone here knows it." "Actually," Zara replied calmly, "I think everyone here just figured out who the real nothing is." Madison's face contorted with fury. "You have no idea who you're messing with. My father owns this place. One word from him, and you'll be thrown out tonight. Is that what you're going to do? Run to Daddy because someone told the truth about you?" "I don't need to run to anyone," Madison snarled. "I can handle trash like you myself." And there it was, exactly what David had predicted. Madison was so enraged by Zara's success that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life. "You want to handle me?" Zara asked, her voice carrying just enough challenge to push Madison over the edge. "Then handle me." Madison looked around quickly, ensuring they were relatively alone behind the refreshment area. Most of the parents and campers were on the other side of the pavilion, focused on the remaining performances. "I've been going easy on you," Madison said, stepping closer. "But I'm done playing games. It's time you learned your place." She shoved Zara hard, harder than she had by the lake. Zara stumbled but didn't fall, her father's training kicking in automatically. "That's assault," Zara said clearly, her voice carrying further than Madison realized. "Prove it," Madison sneered, shoving her again. "Who's going to believe you? Everyone here knows you're just a liar looking for attention." But what Madison didn't know was that Emma, Marcus, and Sophia had positioned themselves strategically around the area, and all three were recording on their phones. What she also didn't know was that David Chen had quietly alerted several parents to what was happening, and they were beginning to drift closer. "You think your daddy's uniform makes you special?" Madison continued, her voice rising with each word. "Military brats are all the same, desperate for attention, making up stories, acting like their parents are heroes when they're really just killers." The insult to her father, spoken loud enough for others to hear, was the line Madison should never have crossed, but it was also exactly what Zara had been waiting for. "My father," Zara said, her voice carrying clearly across the area, "is a decorated Marine sniper who has saved countless lives in service to his country. He's taught me that true strength comes from protecting others, not from attacking them." "Your father is nothing," Madison screamed, completely losing control now. "He's a government thug who couldn't get a real job, and you're just his pathetic daughter who doesn't belong here." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Zara could see that several parents had stopped their conversations to stare. James Pierce was pushing through the crowd, his face dark with concern as he realized his daughter was making a spectacle of herself. But it was too late. Madison, seeing her father approaching and mistaking his expression for support, decided to go for the kill. "You know what?" she said, her voice dripping with venom. "I'm glad your daddy isn't here, because if he was, he'd have to watch me put you in your place." She drew back her hand to slap Zara, and that's when everything changed. Zara moved with the fluid grace her father had drilled into her, catching Madison's wrist effortlessly and redirecting her momentum. Madison, off balance and overcommitted, stumbled forward into what looked like a gentle embrace, but was actually a perfectly executed restraining hold. "I don't want to hurt you," Zara said clearly, her voice calm and controlled, "but I won't let you hurt me either." Madison struggled against the hold, her face red with rage and embarrassment. "Let me go," she screamed. "Someone help me." But the gathered parents weren't looking at Zara with concern. They were looking at Madison with shock and disgust. They had just witnessed a privileged child attempt to physically assault a smaller, younger girl while screaming insults about her military father. "Madison Elizabeth Pierce!" James Pierce's voice cut through the commotion like a blade. "What is the meaning of this?" Zara released Madison immediately, stepping back with her hands visible and non-threatening. Madison whirled toward her father, her face streaming with tears of rage and humiliation. "Daddy, she attacked me," Madison sobbed. I saw exactly what happened," James Pierce said coldly. "And so did everyone else here." The silence that followed was deafening. Madison looked around desperately, seeking support from the other parents, but found only expressions of disapproval and embarrassment. Mrs. Harrison pushed through the crowd, her face pale with panic. "I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," interrupted a new voice, "is how this behavior has been allowed to continue for so long." Catherine Morrison, Chelsea's mother and a federal judge, stepped forward with her phone in her hand. "I recorded the entire incident," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making important decisions. "Miss Pierce initiated physical contact, made threatening statements, and hurled disgraceful insults at a child whose father is serving our country overseas. Now, Catherine," Mrs. Harrison began, "I'm sure if we just—" "No," Judge Morrison said firmly. "This ends now. Mrs. Harrison, I want to know what steps this camp has taken to address what appears to be a pattern of harassment directed at scholarship students." Mrs. Harrison's face went white. There haven't been any formal complaints." "Because you've been dismissing them," said David Chen, stepping into the circle. "I've spent the past week documenting incident after incident of harassment, vandalism, and intimidation directed at Miss Williams, all of which were reported to camp staff and ignored." He held up his own recording device. "Everything is documented. The destroyed personal property, the orchestrated isolation, the systematic campaign of humiliation, and most importantly, the institutional failure to protect a child in your care." James Pierce looked at his daughter with an expression Zara had never seen on an adult's face before. Complete, devastating disappointment. "Madison," he said quietly, "is this true?" Madison's sobs were answer enough. The crowd began to murmur as the full scope of what had been happening became clear. Parents who had dismissed Zara as a scholarship kid began to see her differently, not as an outsider, but as a child who had been systematically tormented while the adults responsible for her safety looked the other way. "I think," said Judge Morrison, "that this requires a full investigation. Mrs. Harrison, I'll be in touch with the camp's board of directors first thing Monday morning." As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with conversation, Zara found herself surrounded by the other scholarship kids and several parents who approached to apologize for not noticing what had been happening. "You were very brave," said Mrs. Chen, David's wife, who had arrived during the commotion. "Your father would be proud." "He will be proud," Zara corrected with a small smile. "I'm going to call him tonight and tell him everything." Later that evening, as the talent show concluded and parents began taking their children home, Zara sat by the lake with David Chen. The recording device sat between them, containing evidence that would change how Camp Wildwood operated forever. "You know this isn't over," David said gently. "There will be investigations, meetings, probably lawyers. Are you ready for that?" "I'm ready," Zara replied. "My father always said that doing the right thing isn't supposed to be easy. What do you think will happen?" "I think Madison will learn that actions have consequences. I think Mrs. Harrison will learn that enabling bullies has consequences too. And I think future scholarship kids who come here will have a very different experience." David smiled. "You sound like your father." "Good," Zara said. "He's the best man I know." The next morning brought swift action. James Pierce, horrified by his daughter's behavior and the public embarrassment she had caused their family, withdrew her from camp immediately and announced that Pierce Industries would be conducting a full review of their charitable donations. Judge Morrison made good on her promise, contacting the board of directors and demanding a complete investigation into the camp's policies regarding harassment and discrimination. Mrs. Harrison was placed on administrative leave pending the review. But the most significant change came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez, the food bank volunteer, had indeed contacted her daughter about Zara's story. The resulting newspaper article, "Privilege and Prejudice at Elite Summer Camp," sparked a broader conversation about inequality in youth programs and the protection of vulnerable children. The story went viral on social media, with the hashtag #InvisibleValor trending as people shared their own stories of overcoming systemic bias and standing up to bullies. Zara's spoken word piece was shared thousands of times, inspiring other young people to find their own voices. 3 weeks later, as Zara packed her belongings to go home, she reflected on how much had changed. The camp had implemented new anti-harassment policies, hired a diversity coordinator, and established a scholarship fund specifically for military children. Madison Pierce would not be returning to Camp Wildwood. Neither would Connor Blake, who had been found guilty of participating in the harassment campaign. Chelsea Morrison, whose mother's intervention had been crucial in exposing the truth, had apologized publicly and was enrolled in counseling to address her behavior. But perhaps most importantly, Emma, Marcus, and Sophia were no longer afraid. The scholarship kids walked through camp with their heads high, knowing they belonged there as much as anyone else. On her last day, Zara stood once again in the small chapel where she had spent so many difficult nights. This time, her father's voice came through clearly on the video call, static-free and proud. "I saw the news article," Staff Sergeant Williams said, his weathered face beaming with pride. "You accomplished your mission, Marine." "I had a good teacher," Zara replied. "You had something better than that," her father said. "You had courage, and that's something nobody can give you. It has to come from inside." As Zara looked around the camp one final time before boarding the bus home, she saw the new signs posted throughout the facility. "Camp Wildwood, a place for all children." Below that, in smaller text, "Harassment and discrimination will not be tolerated." It wasn't perfect. Change never happened overnight, and there would always be people who thought money and connections made them superior to others. But it was a start. And sometimes, Zara thought as the bus pulled away from Camp Wildwood, a start is all you need. The camp grew smaller in the distance, but Zara's sense of accomplishment only grew larger. She had learned something invaluable over the past month, that being small didn't mean being powerless, that being different didn't mean being less than, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with fists, but with truth, courage, and the unwavering belief that justice is worth fighting for. Her father had taught her to defend herself physically, but Camp Wildwood had taught her something even more valuable: how to defend her dignity, her values, and her right to be treated with respect. As the bus carried her toward home, toward her mother's embrace, and eventually toward her father's return, Zara pulled out her new journal, a gift from Mrs. Rodriguez, and began to write. "Day 1, post-camp," she wrote. "Mission accomplished, but the real mission is just beginning." Because Zara Williams, daughter of Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, had learned the most important lesson of all, that true strength isn't about being the biggest or the toughest or the richest. It's about standing up for what's right, even when you're standing alone. And she would never stand alone again. She carried with her the knowledge that there were allies everywhere. Adults like David Chen and Judge Morrison who would stand up for justice, kids like Emma and Marcus who would find their courage when it mattered most, and a father overseas who had taught her that some things are worth fighting for. The bus headed toward home, carrying a young girl who had left as a victim and was returning as a victor. Not because she had defeated her enemies, but because she had discovered something far more powerful than any bully could ever take away: her own unshakable sense of worth. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.